Download this code and get free GPT-4o from codegive.com, link in the description below. Hashtag dependency injection and context injection in specflow. Hashtag what is dependency injection? Dependency injection, DI, is a design pattern that allows a class to receive its dependencies from an external source rather than creating them itself. This promotes loose coupling and enhances testability, as dependencies can be easily mocked or stubbed during testing. Hashtag what is context injection in specflow? In the context of specflow, context injection refers to the process of using DI to supply test classes or step definitions with the necessary dependencies. specflow allows you to configure DI containers to automatically resolve dependencies for your step definitions. Hashtag setting up specflow with dependency injection. 1. Install required packages. You need to install specflow and a DI framework. For this tutorial, we'll use the specflow.nunit and ninject packages. You can install them via NuGet package manager. Install package specflow.nunit. Install package ninject. 2. Create your model and interface. Let's create a simple interface and a class that implements it. Sharp //iCalculator.cs. Public interface iCalculator. Int add, int a, int b. //calculator.cs. Public class calculator, iCalculator. Public int add, int a, int b. Return a plus b. 3. Create specflow step definitions. Next, create a step definition class where we will inject the iCalculator dependency. Sharp //calculatorsteps.cs. Using techtalk.specflow. Using nunit.framework. Binding. Public class calculator steps. Private read-only iCalculator_calculator. Private int_result. Public calculator steps, iCalculator calculator. _calculator equals calculator. Given, add I have numbers, and public void given I have numbers, int a, int b. _result equals _calculator.add, a, b. Then, add the result should be, dot asterisk. Public void then the result should be, int expected. Assert.err equal, expected, _result. 4. Set up dependency injection. You need to configure DI in your test project. Here's how to set up ninject to inject dependencies into your specflow step definitions. Sharp //ninject bindings.cs. Using ninject. Using techtalk.specflow. Binding. Public class ninject bindings, ninject module. Public override void load. Bind iCalculator, dot to calculator. / create a specflow hook to initialize the kernel. Before test run. Public static void before test run. var kernel equals new standard kernel, new ninject bindings. Scenario context.current.set, kernel. / create a custom specflow binding to resolve dependencies. Public class dependency injection binding, iBinding. Public void after scenario. Scenario context.current.dispose. Public void before scenario. var kernel equals scenario context.current.get iKernel. var steps equals kernel.get calculator steps. Scenario context.current.set, steps. 5. Writing your feature file. Now, create a feature file where you define your scenarios. Gherkin. Feature, calculator. Scenario, adding 2 numbers. Given I have numbers 5 and 3. Then the result should be 8. 6 running tests. Now, you can run your tests. SpecFlow will use ninject to inject the iCalculator implementation into your calculator steps class. ### summary. In this tutorial, we demonstrated how to implement dependency injection in SpecFlow using the ninject framework. The key steps include setting up your model, creating step definitions, configuring DI with ninject, and writing a feature file to define your test scenarios. With DI, your tests become more modular and easier to maintain, as you can easily swap out implementations for testing purposes. Context injection in SpecFlow allows you to manage the life cycle and scope of your dependencies effectively. ### Additional considerations. Other DI frameworks. While we used ninject here, other popular DI frameworks like AutoFac or Microsoft.extensions.dependency injection can also be used. Advanced scenarios. Consider using context injection for more complex scenarios, such as injecting services that require shared state or configuration. Testing. Always ensure your step definitions are isolated by using mocks where appropriate when writing unit tests. This should give you a solid foundation in using dependency injection and context injection with SpecFlow. Sure. Dependency injection, DI, is a design pattern that allows a class to receive its dependencies from an external source rather than creating them internally. This promotes loose coupling, easier testing, and better code organization. ### Dependency injection in SpecFlow. SpecFlow is a tool for behavior-driven development, BDD, in .NET that allows you to write tests in a natural language format. It supports dependency injection, which can be used to manage the life cycle and dependencies of your step definitions and hooks. ### Setting up SpecFlow with dependency injection. 1. Install required packages *. Make sure you have the following NuGet packages installed in your .NET project. SpecFlow, specflow.nunit, or any other test framework you are using. specflow.dependency injection. Microsoft.extensions.dependency injection, for DI. 2. Create your services *. Create a simple service that you want to inject into your SpecFlow step definitions. ### Public interface myService. String getData. Public class myService, myService. Public string getData. Return hello from myService. 3. Configure dependency injection in SpecFlow *. You can set up your dependency injection in the SpecFlow configuration. This is typically done in the startup.cs or a similar class. ### Using Microsoft.extensions.dependency injection. Using SpecFlow.dependency injection. Public class startup. Public void configure services, iService collection services. / register services. Services.add singleton myService, myService. 4. Use dependency injection in step definitions *. Now, you can inject your services into your step definitions. ### Using techtalk.specflow. Binding. Public class mySteps. Private read-only myService_myService. Public mySteps, myService myService. _myService equals myService. Given, add I have a service. Public void given I have a service. / use the injected service. var data equals _myService.getData. Console.read data, / outputs, hello from myService. 5. Running tests *. You can now run your SpecFlow tests, and the DI container will automatically resolve and inject the myService instance into your step definitions. ### Hashtag context injection in specflow. Context injection allows you to share data across different step definitions or scenarios. Specflow provides a mechanism called the scenario context and the feature context to store and retrieve shared data. Hashtag example of context injection. 1. Using scenario context asterisk. You can use scenario context to store data that is specific to a scenario. Sharp. Using techtalk.specflow. Binding. Public class my scenario steps. Private read-only scenario context underscore scenario context. Public my scenario steps, scenario context. Underscore scenario context equals scenario context. Given, add I store a value. Public void given I store a value. Underscore scenario context my value equals some important data. Then, add I can retrieve that value. Public void then I can retrieve that value. Var value equals underscore scenario context my value as string. Console.read value, / outputs, some important data. 2. Using feature context asterisk. If you need to share data across multiple scenarios in the same feature file, use feature context. Sharp. Using techtalk.specflow. Binding. Public class my feature steps. Private read-only feature context underscore feature context. Public my feature steps, feature context. Underscore feature context equals feature context. Given, add I set a feature level value. Public void given I set a feature level value. Underscore feature context feature value equals feature wide data. Then, add I can access that feature level value. Public void then I can access that feature level value. Var feature value equals underscore feature context feature value as string. Console.read feature value, / outputs, feature wide data. Hashtag summary. Dependency injection. This pattern helps manage the dependencies of your classes, making your tests more maintainable and easier to test. Context injection. Specflow provides scenario context and feature context to share data between steps or scenarios, facilitating communication between different parts of your test suite. With this setup, you can effectively use dependency injection and context injection in your specflow tests, improving the organization and maintainability of your test code.